morning, guys. Welcome to the podcast. Happy New Year. And I've got from Indiana, Amelia Misenheimer, and she is a real estate investment coach. It's quite interesting. I'm quite excited and intrigued to hear her thoughts on where we are in the real estate market. A lot of the audience are real estate investors, and I'm really happy to just have a conversation on money talks, wealth investing. And Amelia, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really excited to be here and Happy New Year to you as well.
Yeah, I love your passion and your enthusiasm. So just briefly introduce yourself and we'll dive into the questions.
So, as you mentioned, my name is Amelia. I started investing in real estate in 2010, originally from New Mexico. So, most of my investments are in the Southwest area. That's what I'm mostly familiar with. I ended up marrying a military guy who then we moved to England. So, it was quite a different move and it really forced me to change what I was doing. I was a licensed realtor. I had a property management firm where we managed over 450 properties, which obviously doing from afar was rather difficult. So I ended up selling my two companies and transitioned into this in real estate investment coach, consultant, advisory role. And so with that, we actually ended up buying some real estate while we were in England, which was a lot of fun. So we actually have some international properties as well. I like to call it international investing like 3D investing because not only do you have your standard return on investment and cash flow and all those things, you've got currency exchange in there as well. Try to transfer money when the currency exchange is in your favor. It was a whole new level for real estate investing that I never thought I would have to be prepared for, but here we are. So it was actually a really neat experience, and I'm excited about having some of those assets abroad. But then after our time in England, we are located now here in Indiana, and it's been a lot of fun digging into the real estate market here in the Midwest because it's a pretty good little market.
Yeah, I love that. Always getting paid in a stronger or an appreciating currency to hedge kind of your inflation and also your currency debase. We'll start it off. And one thing is talking about is just I got started in real estate in 99, and it's actually it's changed a lot. And you have got overvalued markets and you've got people getting priced out. It's a lot harder to make it when everybody's hearing like, oh, good, get into real estate. What steps or what should be people cautious of? Is real estate still a good investment? Talk about that.
I always say real estate is a good investment, especially living in England. You've got these buildings that are thousands a year old. And guess what? They're still paying rent. So there's still all of this wealth being controlled and had and passed from generation to a generation with real estate. That's like the Queen's largest investment fund or the king now. It's all real estate. It's all based on real estate, residential, commercial. It's really a fascinating progress. So if they can make it last for thousands of years, I'm saying it's still and will always be a good investment. We're dealing with people's shelter. Now it's a lot harder to get involved in real estate today, right? Like there's not these $50,000 properties that you can go out and buy as easily as there used to be, but they still exist. So you can find them. However, they exist probably in a different location than where you're living. And I think that is something that whenever you look at getting involved in real estate and want to start investing, how comfortable are you really investing your money that far away? And what kind of systems and processes and protections do you have in place? Because I live by this saying, nobody's going to watch your money like you do. And I don't care how good of an advisor you have. I don't care how good your people are. Like it's still not their money. It's your money. So how do you create those systems that are strong enough to protect you against long distance investing? So obviously California people, it's a lot harder to find good deals, but they're still there. There's still deals to be had. They're just harder to find and probably not as obvious as they once were.
I love that. Yeah, I know a lot of people from California that moved into Texas where I'm at, and they actually either bought or rent their homes in Texas, and they kept their homes in California because if they sold their properties in California, they'd be out of the house and they got in early. The other question I have for you, we mentioned the real estate game has changed. So is it basically a game for the rich and people that, are people with like landlords and single family and these are obsolete now?
I would say the media and the market makes it seem that way. It really does. You see all these big investors and these big names and these big apartment complexes. But when you take a step back from all of the input we get on social media and you drive down the road in your own hometown, in your own neighborhood, what do you see? You see all these houses and they're not owned by BlackRock. They're not owned by Greystone. They're not owned by these big players. They're owned by mom and pops, they're owned single family homes, they're owned by local investors. So it seems like the game is dead, but it's really not because you're still dealing with housing and everybody needs shelter. And right now in this country, there is a housing shortage. And I do think with our new president coming to power, that is going to be something that he emphasizes and pushes and makes it hopefully a little easier. Because and that's the thing too. I had somebody else talking about how can we do these different investments and how can we structure this? I'm like, it depends on what the lender says. And so much, if you're playing the game, you got to play with a bank or a lender of some sort. And then those are really the rule setters, right? The lenders or the money men are the rule setters. And there is still nothing that says that you cannot go buy a house and trade my big Chevy truck for your dumpy rental and I can make a swap and it's a legal tender. It's a legal trade. It still can happen, but that's not really how society functions today. So playing by the rules of the money man. Yeah, I guess whoever has the money is the rich man's game and they set the rules, but it's just a set of rules that we got to play by. And there's plenty of ways to play.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to ask you about a change in administration and also emerging technologies, because this whole process of you got to get a mortgage and a loan and you have to submit all this documents and paperwork. And even me, at one point, this is ridiculous. I just paid cash because it's so much easier than going through all this. But so one thing is what are your thoughts on interest rates? Because my thoughts are they're going to be pretty much 4 or 5%, but people are hoping 0%. What are your thoughts with Trump coming in?
I don't think they'll ever be 0%. Like it's not, I don't want to say it's not good for business, but interest rates aren't a bad thing. When I got into real estate back in 2000, interest rates were like 8%, and that was normal, and business still happened. But I think what's really hard about the interest rates today is how much inflation has hit and prices of houses. Because 20 some odd years ago, prices were significantly cheaper. So 8% on 200,000 is a different ballgame than 8% on 500,000. So I think that's the bigger part of almost the purchase price and interest rates. That correlation versus 5, 6, 7, 8% interest rates are not a bad thing. They're still very reasonable. Because I remember as a kid growing up, my parents always talked business with us, always talked investing with us. I remember they were talking to me about 18% interest rates. And then that I just can't even wrap my mind around because that's just a whole different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember those days, the 8% before pre to the, and I think basically it's basically the price. Talk about, because one thing that's really on my mind now is because I live in Texas and we get flooding and hurricanes, and a lot of insurance companies are refusing to cover certain areas, and that's going to impact your ability to buy a home or invest in a home, especially get qualified for a mortgage. So talk about this area of how you address climate change and climate risk as a real estate investor.
That's a fabulous question. And I think it's a fascinating topic. I've listened to several different podcasts about insurance companies, and I think that there's going to change. Our insurance industry is going to change because the way it's going is not sustainable. What does that look like in the future? I don't know. But what really opened my eyes to how different our system was is my property insurance in England for the house we lived in as a primary residence was like 150 pounds a year. That's $200 a year, which is mind blowing. So clearly something has some government subsidies over there. And I don't know if it's the way they build or whatnot, but I was like, whoa, I had to double check it because I couldn't believe that was right. Because here I'm used to a couple $1,000s a year per property. So I definitely think it's going to have an effect. And I wish I had a glass ball on this because there could be a lot of money made if you knew where this was going. But I do think these areas, Florida, the Texas coast that kind of continue to get hit by these storms are you're either gonna have to go private insurance route or YOLO it and go no insurance and just carry a liability insurance. And if your property builds down, I hope you've got the ability and assets to rebuild, which is what we've already seen going on in California and some of the common burn areas. There you can't get insurance. So either you build and afford to rebuild your property as needed. And I think that's an important part too about insurance. There's coverage of your property and then there's the liability coverage. And I think we often lump those together, but you could still have the liability coverage to operate as a business owner and either self-insure. And I think that conversation is becoming a lot more frequent because especially with the way interest rates are priced today and how much people are paying in interest, it wouldn't be that hard to set up either a small group or private self-insured and do it yourself.
Yeah, the insurance company, the insurance industry here in the United States, I think it's a big colossal scam. But the next question I have for you is talk about, because especially during COVID, the government gave tenants a lot of rights and privileges, and they basically stripped the homeowners or landlords of their rights. So basically gave the rights to the tenants. So talk about this area where you have tenant, not only you have climate and change and you have to worry about your house getting obliterated, but then you have people that don't even pay, and then they have more rights than you as an owner.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Obviously, this is state by state specific. So anytime you talk to an investor, you're like, look at landlord friendly states. And that's what this means, right? Pick a state that backs the landlord at least somewhat over the tenant, because it is crazy how many rights some of these states are giving tenants. And yes, I agree people should not be homeless. And yes, I agree there should be protections in place and all of that. But that does not fall on my shoulders to do that for everybody in a state, right? Like, it's my property. I paid for it. I'm responsible for it. No, you should not be squatting in my house. I do think it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal, especially with social media, as people are learning more and more about these tricks, if you will, if you want to call it that. But again, that gets back to, how do you protect your asset? If your property and your investment property is 2,000 miles away and someone's squatting on it, how frequently is somebody going over there checking on it? Is your property manager driving by weekly? Because these things happen overnight. Essentially, somebody can move in, and then all of a sudden you've got this whole disaster on your hands. Whereas if it's your property and it's closer by, it gives something for you to be able to go check on. You've got a better feel of things going on, and you also know people in the area. You know the plumber Steve who's going to drive by and say, "Hey Joe, did your lights were on the other day? Do you have somebody moved in?" And you say, "Oh no, I don't. Let me go check on it." And that's also the niceties of investing in a smaller area, where you have those connections and have the friendly neighbors and have the relationships to help protect your assets.
Mhm. Yeah, really interesting. The other question I have for you, I'm not sure if you, but this whole area where it's like you have title, you have escrow, and you also have now the realtors commissions cut in half as well. And then so, and I'm always thinking about what the internet did for the media, did for all the, if you look at it over the last 24 years, how it changed a lot of things. Talk about this whole integrated process, and how do you see this process getting better and easier and just more efficient?
So it'll be interesting, right? A realtor's commission did not get cut in half theoretically. So now it's half being paid by the buyer, half being paid by the seller is the new process. And that's not even true all the time. There's still a lot of sellers who are paying both commissions because it's built into the price. And I think, again, that gets back to the affordability of a property, right? How many buyers have enough cash in their pocket to afford the down payment, to afford the closing fees, to afford a buyer commission for a realtor, to afford all of these things? Yes, in the scheme of things, you're still paying for a realtor commission because it's built into the sales price. It's built in, it takes it out of their seller proceeds. It's still, all Washington is the same, but it's what pocket is this coming out of? So I think putting more of this stress on the buyer is going to make it harder. It's a higher barrier to entry to get into the market, because now you've got one more thing, one more cost to pay for, or you don't. You can do it all on your own too. But I think as all of these systems and the complications and all that stuff is created as a way to keep people out. And I feel like realtors have done that with their contracts. Lawyers have done that. All of these people, and there's so much fear built up into all of this. There is nothing that says I cannot create a purchase agreement with you, Chris, for your property in Texas and say, hey, like, I want a property in Texas. And we can draft it on a napkin and we can both sign it and we can take it to the title company and they can start working on it. Because as long as it has certain terms, it's a legal contract. And it's so easy to just blow this up and out of proportion and make it scary and complicated and difficult. And yes, people will sue you. Yes, there are people out there looking for a fight. But for the most part, when you're dealing with properties and landlords and good people, you can get deals done in a lot of creative different ways.
Yeah. What industries within real estate do you see have a lot of potential? Because with the interest rate issue, commercial real estate, and you got hybrid work from home, that's really put a dent. But I heard like things such as like data storage, and talk about these niches that are particularly doing well or that investors can focus on in 2025 and beyond.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity in commercial and turning it into residential, because as we've seen with business and more businesses moving online and there's less business, like standard commercial business, we still need our downtowns, right? We still need our main streets. We still need to be able, we can't all live on Amazon delivering to our next door. We still need some of these local resources. But especially in big cities with all of these office buildings that are vacant, I think there's a lot of opportunity to work on that conversion. And anytime you take a property and you do, I'll say the brain damage behind it, whether it's a flip, whether it's building on blanks, piece of land, anytime you go through the effort of adding that value add and doing the hard part of, say, getting it rezoned, getting it reclassified, you're value adding to that property. And I think the more people are willing to go through that and change some of these, I think is where a lot of the opportunity is. I think storage is always a good one, which is crazy because it's people will pay to store their stuff. And especially living the military life now, some people have stuff in 4 different states, which blows my mind, but they do, and it works. I think that there's always opportunity there. But I also think smaller properties. I think that'll be an interesting shift as lot sizes get smaller. Most places have a traditional 6,000 square foot kind of standard lot size, but trying to reduce the lot sizes, build properties closer together to address the shortage. But also, nobody wants to take care of a lawn anymore. Nobody's out there mowing all day on Saturday. They're 3 acres. And while that does exist, but for the most part, people want the easy shut the door, lock it, and then be able to go for the weekend or go for holiday or whatever it is. And I think that's going to be a lot more of a shift in real estate as well.
3D printing as a threat to home building, or because you can theoretically spin up a home and it's, you don't have to pay like 300, 400,000. What are your thoughts?
So my background's actually in manufactured homes. So mobile homes is what I grew up doing. I would say that's the precursor, right, of this 3D concept. And I don't think the technology is fully there for 3D houses yet. They are printing them. There has been some really cool developments. You've got technicality issues with the drying of the concrete and the rebar, the reinforcements, and you can get into all the specifications of it. But I think it's amazing. But I think you're still going to have, I'll call this stigma of like a traditional site-built home, because you have it for a traditional site-built home versus a mobile home. And even though that they are built to the exact same coating, even though they're used the same 2x4s to be built, even though they've got the same shingles on the roof, they've got the same drywall inside, there's still that stigma. So I think depending on how this 3D printing goes and how the marketing of it goes, if you will, and how lending goes. Because again, who's going to lend on this 3D house that has no proven track record? How is insurance going to insure it? What is that going to look like? So you've got so many different variables that if you have the ability to go print a house and play with it and be the trendsetter, great. But there's still a lot of pieces that I think will be interesting to see how they fall from land and how the kind of industry and homeowners too feel about them.
Yeah. One thing I love to ask guests, I love your extensive library, and for the people that are listening on the audio, you can check out the video live stream podcast in the links in the show notes. But what is your one book that you would recommend to people looking to increase their wealth, financial independence in 2025?
I always like to recommend Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I think a lot of people, and I preface it because I don't always agree with all of his theories. And I think that a lot of people can get lost. I've had friends read it like, this is terrible. I'm like, no, I think it's the principle of how do you make your money work for you? And how do you get it to work and grow and last generations beyond just you? So I think that's always the best beginner book of where to start. And then there's a new one, the Cody Sanchez Main Street Millionaire. I think that's a great one. I have not fully read it yet, but I'm excited about that focus on reinvesting back in your community where you're at, because I feel like so much of, especially with the internet, and it's so easy to hop on Zillow and look for real estate anywhere in the world. But what about your backyard? What are you doing in your backyard? Could you rehab an old dumpy property that's an eyesore that one turns into a good rental for you, and two, you're bettering your community by getting rid of the blight?
Yeah. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read that in 2002, and that changed the whole trajectory, just the way I saw the world, and really fascinating. And then how can people find you on social media? And I know you're a real estate investment coach, so tell clients or people listening what you do and how you can help them.
Yeah. So I am Amelia G. Misenheimer everywhere on the internet. And I really wish I would have thought of a shorter one when I set all this up, when I got started. But so Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those, just Amelia Misenheimer. I'm the only one. And you can work with me. I do free discovery calls with people to discuss what might work for them, what options are available to them. And then I can also work with clients to either build and find properties that align with their investment goals if they're too busy working, don't know where to start, don't know what options are available to them, helping them create a strategic plan that is able for them to implement, or even help walk them through the implementation process, building out a single property portfolio, however they want to build it out. But focusing really on investing in a way that works for you as an individual, because that also isn't talked about enough. Of you got to buy properties that align with your life. And if you're not going to be around to fix toilets, don't buy properties where you got to go fix toilets.
Yeah, I really love that. And just find the investment style that best suits you, and or even the best investment vehicle. For some, it could be real estate. For some, it could be stocks or building a business. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed your coming on the show and your energy and your passion, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure being here. I appreciate your time.